पॉलिसी बाजार पर 1 करोड़ रुपए का टर्म लाइफ इंश्योरेंस केवल 450 रुपए महीने से शुरू। वाव!
Well, up next on the program, the Central Bureau of Investigation has arrested the Videocon group founder Venugopal Dhoot in connection with the ICICI Bank loan fraud case. The arrest comes 2 days after the arrest of the bank's former CEO Chanda Kocchar. The CBI is investigating a case linked to alleged irregularities in an over 3,000 crore loan provided by ICICI to the Videocon group when Chanda Kochhar was heading the private sector bank. The big question, bank frauds in India, why do these happen so frequently and where does this leave the system? We've got a great panel, but first I'd like to go across to Jaimani Bhagwati, the director of IDFC Bank, and Rajneesh Kumar, the former chairperson of SBI. Mr. Bhagwati, let me come across to you first. We can look at this through various prisms. There's the entire issue of bank fraud. Then we can look into the entire issue of insolvency in certain cases, the issue of recoveries as well. But ultimately, when it comes to Chanda Kochhar, isn't it an issue of trust that a leader of a bank as large as ICICI could betray the trust of millions across the country? How does one, how would one look at this in any way apart from that this is a woman who breached the trust of millions across the country with what appears to be an out-and-out case of corruption? I give you a loan, my husband takes back a small amount.
No, you're absolutely right. There is a breach of trust here. But there's a context to all this in the sense of what has been going on in the banking sector in our country. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that loan has been fully repaid. But I may be wrong because, there are so many items which are flashing across one's phone today because of this arrest of this high-profile person. But take a step back. To look at long-term lending within India. You might recall the economic survey of 2016-17, and we keep talking about the twin balance sheet problem. The one side is the bank, and unfortunately, public sector banks are always held up to ridicule, and I strongly disagree with that point of view. And the private sector banks, and in this case, this is a private bank, which started off as a term lending institution in 1955 and did a reverse merger. Individuals can go wrong at various places. I would think that one needs to look at it systemically. And systemically, for one thing, we don't want to open up. Now, for instance, we are talking about, this is a relatively small loan that Mr. Dhoot has taken. If I remember right, there were Videocon Industries took 65,000 crores from Bank of Maharashtra, defaulted on it, and has only repaid 5,000 crores. So this goes on and on. So I'll stop here unless you want me to give more details about the background.
Rajneesh Kumar, Mr. Kumar, how should one actually be looking at this? Because Chanda Kochhar is somebody who actually cleared this loan, a part of which evidently landed into her husband's account as some sort of a kickback or a payback. But along with her, there were other extremely well-known people who were all leaders in the banking sector who were part of the process to clear this. So was this not an out-and-out failure of leadership to clear this loan in the first place?
No, Vishnu, let me clarify or let me make a statement that a case which is under investigation and sub judice, to me it is not appropriate that we discuss this. Right? When I agreed to come on the channel, it was about the banking frauds in general. So, a specific case, I will not comment. Because we can't do this at a national TV channel where the CBI is investigating the matter and courts are looking into the
So
matter.
why don't you tell us what this is about, sir? Isn't this part of a larger problem? Because it's not just Nirav Modi and it's not just the others. It's the list is huge and the amount in terms of recoveries is minuscule.
So let me put the matter in perspective from the banking point of view about the frauds. So banking system is prone to the fraud. So let us admit that is the reality. And the frauds are of several types. One are what is called credit related or loan related frauds. The other is about the operational frauds. When you go to ATM, your card gets copied, money is siphoned.
Yes.
In many cases, there is identity theft. You do a transaction on an e-commerce site, there is a case of identity theft and a fraud would happen. The other category is phishing calls which you receive. So the frauds relating to credit also can be of several types. One is in couple of states, I won't name the states, but when I was SBI chairman, there were mortgage related frauds where because their land records were not properly maintained and the title deed would turn out to be defective or fraudulent. So that is another category. Till 2012 or 13, when RBI came out with a circular where they said that if there is a diversion of funds, that has to be reported as fraud. Prior to that, diversion of funds was not reported as a fraud. It was NPA. Now, frauds can happen for both reasons. One is where there is an insider involvement, and the other is where there is no insider involvement.
Right.
So, what you have to recognize and realize that banking system, because it deals in money, day in, day out, and millions of transactions happen. It is vulnerable to frauds, and it is not that the banking system does not react to it. For every case, there is a root cause analysis done. You take steps to plug in what were the weaknesses which led to the fraud, and then sometimes the fraudsters would find.
No, and yet,
new
Mr.
ways.
Kumar, if you look at just the amount recovered and the number of cases which exist, I realize our banking sector is huge, but the volume of cash which has disappeared, it just shows that this is a system at so many levels which is failing.
No, again, as I said, that when it comes to loan-related frauds, what you have to recognize that we are double counting also in a way. That one is that there are NPLs and banks are making provisions, and for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, there was a situation when the NPL problem was the accounts which became NPL, it was very high and all the banks suffered in the process. And as I said that till 2012, till such time IBR said that diversion of funds is a fraud, it was not accounted for as a fraud. So that is, let us not get into numbers, but if you are asking me...
No, but sir, why not get into numbers? Because in fact, Mr. Bhagwati has come out with these numbers with a great deal of detail. And would you like to come in? I mean, I was just looking at the entire process of recovery. But half a second, sir. These statistics are important. I don't think in our country it's enough to say that, look, it's a system which reacts and it's a big system and there is a system of checks and balances, we try and fix it. One of the biggest problems is the amount of time it actually takes to sort out the mess. In fact, there was this number, 270 days as of March 2021, ongoing insolvency resolution processes, about 80% were not resolved after 270 days, which is the statutory outer limit. That's just one of any number of examples. Bottom line, there's no justice. It's justice delayed.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want me to comment on that.
Please, comment. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, you have a strange situation where the then leadership of RBI came out with a circular in February 2018, I believe it was, and then it was struck down in April 2019 by the Supreme Court. I think one can criticize a judgment of the Supreme Court, not the judges. So I very strongly criticize that judgment on the grounds that that particular circular of RBI, which internal RBI studies showed, managed to hasten the process of resolution of cases, which again became slow after that particular guideline was struck down by the Supreme Court. But coming back to what you said about resolution and the number of days it is taking, let me put it very pithily. You have 70 judges approximately in our national company law tribunals. You need 5 times the number, which is 350, and that responsibility falls squarely in the ambit of the central government.
Right.
It has not appointed enough judges. You look around the world. I've actually done a study. That's why I'm familiar with the numbers. And nowhere in the world can you manage this kind of loan volume and the number of cases with a number of relatively junior NCLT judges. So you need to beef up the process by which the insolvency.
Otherwise this will keep getting heard forever. Okay, I'm also joined. Sure, I'm also joined by Nasser Salim. Madan Sabnavis also joins us. Also, HP Ranina. I'd like to thank you three for being with us. Nasser Salim. The other the other point which I think one needs to sort of look at is the actual volume of rupees. It's staggering. If you look at the average amount in terms of loans which have been given, which are it's upwards of 20,000 crores as an average in many of these high-profile cases. So, what does that actually indicate about the banking sector?
Good evening, Vishnu. See, I'll tell you, volume aside, I think that's a pertinent question, but I think that's also a function of which the economy is growing.
In fact, let me give it to you in a little bit more detail. I found the point that I was looking for. The latest, one of the newer economic surveys have reported that the average size of non-performing loans for the 50 largest borrowers was estimated to be about 20,000 crores. This is a colossal amount.
No doubt. I think, the volumes are large. And I think, coming back to your original question on to the earlier two panelists, I think, Vishnu, we have to somewhere go back and understand two key things here. Number one, is there any quid pro quo situations that arise when we look at this from a framework of policy? See, I'll tell you something, Vishnu. RBI has set out very stringent guidelines and policies for disbursal of loans, and especially large ticket sizes, which are consortium financing.
Yep.
They're consortium, financing options, basically. And there, if you ask me, the SOPs, the bank's code of conduct, the framework for dealing with conflict of interest and fiduciary duties are very clearly outlined, I must say.
Okay.
They need to be followed to the T, Vishnu. And I think, wherever we've seen an imbalance between corporate governance and, corporate governance is something which is essentially involves creating a balance between the many stakeholders of the company, such as shareholders, customers, suppliers, executive, government, and the community. Whenever there is an imbalance between any of these, we see frauds amounting to this colossal amount that you've mentioned.
Sure. Just one sec, I wanted to quickly go across. I'm running short on time. Madan Sabnavis with us. The other point is the entire issue of recoveries. If you look at the amount recovered as a percentage of the amount involved, 2012, 2013, only 22%, went down to 18% the following year, 12%, 10% 2015, 2016, 10% 2016, 2017. The actual recoveries are a joke. The money is gone. It's disappeared.
Absolutely, Vishnu. I think that's the malaise which we have whenever we talk of this kind of willful defaults. And while the number which you're talking of is definitely large, we should also remember that it's just these few handful of cases which give overall banking a bad name. So the way I look at it, Vishnu, is that this needs to be a wake-up call for the overall banking system. Because, the problem is that when the conditions are very good in the economy, everybody tends to be over-optimistic. The lending standards are also narrowed. Now, what you're talking of in terms of fraud, I think that would be more a kind of an exception than a rule. But I think banks tend to be a bit more lax when things are going good. You think, okay, credit is going to grow at 20%, 25%. And you also feel that these kind of big ticket loans which you give also helps you to meet your own targets in terms of your own profits or whatever the income which you're targeting.
Right.
And that's what I think that's a kind of an error which was made, which led to the NPA problem. And part of it, what you're talking of, has also resulted in these fraudulent cases. So I think this is something which banks are cognizant of, rather than looking at, okay, what's happened is definitely not good. But I think if banks have learned the lesson and have better processes for screening the loans and more importantly, monitoring the end use. I think what you're talking of is really whether the funds are being used for the purpose for which they've been taken. And I think that is definitely work in progress. And I think the banks are quite cognizant of this fact. And I think they have taken a lot of action on this.
Mr. Ranina, this is the point that keeps coming up. If you look at the sanction strength of judges in an economy as large as ours, where frauds come up, and that is at one level on account of the size of the beast, the effort to actually raise the number of judges is minimum, it seems. Isn't that at the root of the problem, that there is no justice because there aren't enough judges?
You're right. This is a perennial problem in India because there is this tussle between the government and the judiciary as to the appointment of the judges. If that can be speeded up somehow, if some more powers can be given by which, say, the Supreme Court can appoint at least the lower category judges as fast as they can, then things can be speeded up. Another issue is that we have this retirement age of 62 years and for High Court judges and 65 years for Supreme Court judges. There's no need for this age limit. We can easily extend this limit and make sure that the existing judges who have a wealth of experience can continue to function. Even as ad hoc judges, there's a provision in our constitution where the ad hoc judges can be appointed. Now, why can't this be done so that the number of judges increase? Why do judges have to retire at the age of 62? When the Supreme Court judge continues till 65, in America, they're there for life. But apart from that, we can easily have a group of people who can certainly sit on the benches and expedite these matters. Now, in NCLT today, what we found that they are dealing with corporate law matters, they are dealing with IBC matters, they are dealing with so many matters. We need to have a separate.
And there are only 16 benches.
IBC and for
As
NCLT.
I understand it, there are only about 16 benches in all of India.
You have additional benches only for insolvency, additional benches for company law. You have to have more judges, more specialized judges.
Right. So it's not enough to say that the system has to be cleaned up. If the system isn't cleaned up, who's there to clean it up if the judges aren't in place? Look, I'm out of time on this, but I'll end by the way I began. The entire case of ICICI, a colossal breach of trust in some of people who we believed were some of the finest in the country. Let's see what finally happens in the court. But why is India's banking sector so vulnerable to frauds? Unfortunately, I suspect that's something that we'll need to revisit. I'm out of time on this program. From all of us here, good night.